Everyone knew him as Mr. Raza. A millionaire with sharp eyes, a colder heart, and no patience for mistakes. He ran his business like a machine, efficient, emotionless, and calculated. People respected him, feared him, but no one truly knew him. Not even the staff inside his massive mansion nestled on the quiet outskirts of the city. He trusted no one, especially not the maid. Her name was Meher. She had joined just 2 months ago. Young, quiet, barely spoke unless spoken to. She never asked for anything. She always came on time, worked longer than required, and kept her eyes low. Too low. And to Mr. Raza, that was suspicious. He had seen people pretend before. He had seen smiles hide greed, and kindness hide knives. In his world, silence wasn't innocence, it was strategy. So he decided to test her. It was early morning when he opened the safe in his study. Just enough for the contents inside to be visible. Bundles of cash, gold ornaments, and an expensive watch were laid inside in plain view. He tilted the safe door just right, so it would look like it hadn't been locked by mistake. He checked the security cameras twice, made sure everything was working, and then left the house, telling the driver to take him just 2 streets away. From his car, he accessed the live camera feed on his phone. 10 minutes passed. Meher entered the room. She was holding a rag and a spray bottle, clearly in the middle of her cleaning routine. She moved around the study table, dusted the chair, then turned and froze. She had seen the safe. The door was slightly ajar. The green glow of currency notes and the subtle shimmer of gold were unmistakable. Mr. Raza sat up straighter in his car seat, watching closely. Her body language changed. She took a single step closer to the safe. Her hand reached out slowly. This was it. She was going to do it. But then, her hand stopped. She glanced once at the ceiling, where the camera was installed. Then, in one smooth motion, she pushed the safe door closed. Gently, respectfully. She wiped the dust off its edges and adjusted the chair that stood nearby. Before she walked out of the study, she looked directly at the camera. Not with fear, not with guilt, but with something deeper. Her eyes were calm. Hurt, maybe. Or disappointed. Mr. Raza stared at the screen, confused. He rewound the footage. Watched again. Slower this time. Why hadn't she taken anything? Was she smarter than he thought? Or was she actually honest? That evening, he walked into the kitchen, where she was finishing the dishes. She didn't flinch when he entered. Meher, he said. Yes, sir. You saw the safe this morning? She nodded. I did. Why didn't you take anything? He asked, bluntly. She turned to face him, her hands still wet from the water. Because I wasn't raised to steal. There was no arrogance in her voice, just quiet truth. But what she said next hit him harder than he expected. I know people like you don't trust people like me. You think we're all waiting for a chance to cheat you. But not all of us are the same. I work here because I need the money, yes. But I have a younger brother. I pay his school fees. I was in college once too. I wanted to be a teacher. She paused for a moment, but her eyes didn't waver. My father passed away. Life changed. But my values didn't. Mr. Raza couldn't speak. Not immediately. Something about her words touched something he thought had long died inside him. He remembered his own mother, working as a tailor to keep food on the table. He remembered the judgment in people's eyes when they saw her old clothes. And he remembered the way she would always say, no matter how hard life gets, don't lose your goodness. He had lost it. But she hadn't. The next morning, Meher arrived and found an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a crisp white sheet of paper. A handwritten note. Some people pass tests without knowing they're being tested. I'm sorry for doubting you. Let me help you now. Below that line was a scholarship certificate. Fully paid college tuition. A seat reserved at a private institution. Signed, Raza Ahmed. She read the letter once, then again, unsure if she was dreaming. Her hands trembled slightly, and for the first time since she joined the mansion, she allowed herself to smile. Just a little. But this wasn't the end of her story. Because what Meher would go on to do with that opportunity would one day shake headlines, inspire thousands, and even lead Mr. Raza to a truth he had never expected. She would take that second chance and build something not even wealth could buy. And one day, years later, when journalists asked Mr. Raza about the most valuable investment he had ever made, he didn't mention a property, or a merger, or a stock. He simply said, "A young woman, who didn't touch what wasn't hers, and gave me back something I had lost my faith in people." She folded the letter carefully, almost reverently, as if it might disappear if she blinked. That evening, she went home and told her younger brother, Samir. He didn't say a word, just stared at her, wide-eyed. Then, slowly, he hugged her. "I knew you were meant for more, API," he whispered. "Now the world will know too." The following week, Meher began her classes. Mornings at the college, evenings still working part-time at Mr. Raza's mansion. She didn't ask for less work, didn't ask for favors. She managed both with quiet grace and relentless focus. Her eyes didn't look down anymore, they looked forward. Mr. Raza watched all of it. At first, silently, then, curiously, and finally, with pride. He noticed the way she still folded the towels perfectly, still made tea just the way he liked, still left the study dust-free, even when she came home exhausted from classes. But now, he also noticed how she always carried her books under her arm, the spines marked with notes, the pages curled at the edges from being read too many times. One evening, as she walked past the open lounge, he called out to her, "Meher." She paused, turned. "Yes, sir. You're studying literature?" She nodded. "And education. I want to teach girls from my neighborhood one day." Mr. Raza was silent for a moment, then said something no one had ever heard him say before. "If you ever need help, ask." She didn't respond right away, just smiled faintly and nodded. That was the beginning. Weeks passed, then months. Meher started tutoring part-time. First just her neighbors' daughters. Then word spread. Soon, her tiny one-room apartment was filled every evening with little girls in uniforms, sitting on the floor, listening to her read aloud stories of courage, science, dreams, and dignity. She didn't charge them. Mr. Raza found out, not through her, but through a local newspaper article someone had left on his office desk. A headline read, "The Maid Who Became a Mentor. Young woman transforms her home into a free school for underprivileged girls." And there, in the photo, was Meher, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by girls smiling with wide eyes and hopeful hearts. Mr. Raza stared at the image for a long time. That evening, he visited her neighborhood. Quietly, without his driver or any guards. He stood across the narrow alley and watched from a distance. The soft hum of young voices reciting lessons spilled out onto the street. And there was Meher, holding a child's notebook, her voice calm but firm, guiding, teaching, nurturing. He returned home in silence. That night, he couldn't sleep. The next day, he made a decision. When Meher arrived at the mansion, a white envelope was already waiting for her on the kitchen table. Inside was a property deed, a small, sunlit house with a yard and space enough to convert into a real school. A note was attached. "You believed in education. Now let education believe in you." She stared at it for a long time. Her hands trembled. Her breath caught in her throat. And for the first time in years, Mr. Raza watched her cry. Not tears of pain. Tears of possibility. But this wasn't the final chapter. Because Meher didn't just stop at opening a school. She went further. She founded an entire foundation for girls' education across rural communities. She was invited to speak at seminars, conferences, and international education forums. Her words, once barely spoken, now moved entire rooms. And Mr. Raza? He began to change, too. The man who once saw the world in numbers now started seeing it in stories. in human worth. He started sponsoring other students. Quietly. Anonymously. But Meher knew. She always knew. Years later, Meher was invited to receive a national award. Cameras flashed, ministers clapped, and her brother stood proudly in the front row. As she walked to the stage, she looked out at the audience and found Mr. Raza, seated silently in the last row. No suit. No spotlight. Just a man with folded hands and soft eyes. She smiled. Not to thank him, but to acknowledge him. Because sometimes the real reward isn't in money or medals but in knowing that one moment of honesty can echo through an entire lifetime. The national award changed everything. News channels played clips of her speech. Her words, gentle, confident, and full of fire, echoed across living rooms and smartphones. People who once looked down on maids began whispering her name with awe. Girls from broken homes held on to her story like a rope pulling them out of darkness. But amid all the noise, Meher remained grounded. She still wore simple clothes. Still visited her old neighborhood. Still taught in person whenever she could. And every month, she mailed one handwritten letter, a personal note of thanks to Mr. Raza. He never replied. But he kept every single one, stacked neatly in the drawer of his study desk. For a man who had once trusted no one, those letters became something sacred. A reminder that some people enter your life not to work for you but to wake you up. Then one day, something changed. It was a Sunday morning when Meher's phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. A voice she hadn't heard in months. It was Mr. Raza's lawyer. Mr. Raza collapsed in his office, the man said. A stroke. He survived, but he can't speak. And he won't see anyone. Except you. Meher felt the air leave her lungs. She cancelled her lecture that day, handed her classes to her volunteers, and went straight to the private hospital. When she entered the room, he was sitting by the window in a wheelchair. Thinner, paler, but his eyes still sharp. Still watching. She walked up to him and gently placed a copy of her foundation's magazine on his lap. It had a picture of a group of girls graduating from the school he had helped her build. "This is all you," she said softly. "Even if the world doesn't know it." He tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. So instead, he reached for her hand. His fingers, now weaker, curled around hers. And for the first time in his life, Mr. Raza cried without shame. Silent tears. Not of regret, but of release. Because for the first time, he didn't feel alone. Meher stayed by his side for hours. She brought books for him. Read to him. Sometimes, just sat in silence while the wind moved the curtain beside them. And slowly, day by day, his recovery began. He couldn't return to the business world the same way again. But he didn't need to. Because now, he had a different calling. With Meher's help, Mr. Raza began quietly funding educational centers for elder women, mothers, grandmothers, even widows who never got a chance to read or write. They called it No Age for Light. It became a movement across the country. Meher was the face. Raza was the silent force behind it. And together, they transformed not just schools, not just communities but hearts. People who once thought wealth was only in money began to realize it could also be in kindness, in wisdom, in second chances. Years later, at an international summit, Meher was asked, "Who was the first person who truly believed in you?" She smiled and said, "He didn't believe in me at first. In fact, he tried to catch me failing." The crowd chuckled. But when he saw I didn't fall, he didn't just lift me up. He let me fly. There was a pause. Then a standing ovation. Meanwhile, back home, Mr. Raza watched the speech from his study, the old letters still stacked beside him. He couldn't clap. But his smile said everything. The years passed like pages turning in a well-loved book. No Age for Light became a national campaign. Over 10,000 women learned to read and write, some for the first time in their 60s. Stories flooded social media, grandmothers reading bedtime stories, widows opening bank accounts, and elderly women signing their own names for the very first time. And behind it all were two names whispered with admiration: Meher and Raza. They never sought the spotlight. They rarely appeared together. But in every successful woman walking out of those centers, a piece of Meher's past and Raza's redemption lived on. Until one day, a storm arrived. It started with a tabloid headline: former maid turned activist accused of fraud misuse of funds? Meher saw it just before walking into a class of teenage girls. Her fingers went numb. She stared at the screen in disbelief. It wasn't just one article, it was dozens. Screenshots of edited documents, out-of-context photos, anonymous quotes, accusations of stealing donations, of building her brand instead of building schools. It was cruel. And it spread like wildfire. People who once praised her began whispering. Sponsors pulled back. A major news channel announced a debate segment with the title, "Is Meher Just a Clever Lies?" That night, Meher didn't sleep. The next morning, she went to the hospital. Mr. Raza hadn't spoken a word in months. His condition had slowly worsened. But when he saw her, pale, trembling, something shifted in his eyes. She knelt beside him and whispered, "They're trying to ruin everything." His fingers moved slowly toward the edge of his tray. He tapped once, then again. She placed a pen in his hand. And with shaky letters, he wrote 4 words on a blank notepad: "Tell them the truth." She nodded. But the truth wasn't simple. Because someone was behind it. And it wasn't a stranger. It was someone from within her own foundation. Her former accountant, a man she had once helped out of poverty, had stolen donation money, covered his tracks, and used Meher's name to launder funds. He had sold the story to the media to deflect blame when auditors started sniffing around. Meher now had a choice. She could stay silent and hope the storm passed. Or she could face the storm and bring everything to light. She chose the latter. At the press conference, she stood in front of a wall of microphones. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. She brought out evidence, shared files, named the man, and with full transparency, opened the foundation to an external audit. But it was what she said next that left the room in stunned silence. "I was once tested by a man who left his safe open, waiting for me to fail. But I didn't. Because I knew who I was, even if he didn't. And now, I am being tested again, not with money, but with truth. And I will pass this test too." The media storm faded. The truth came out. The accountant was arrested. And Meher? She didn't lose supporters, she gained even more. Because people now saw not just her success, but her strength, her honesty, her refusal to break, even under fire. 1 week later, she returned to the hospital. Mr. Raza was sitting up, the notepad in his lap. She handed him a newspaper. The headline read. She passed the test again. He looked at her, and with effort, scribbled another shaky line. "Now they know you." She smiled, and replied, softly, "Because you gave me the chance to show them." But the story wasn't finished. Because just when life seemed to calm, a letter arrived. Old, yellowed, with handwriting that stopped her heart. It was addressed to her mother. But the return name on the envelope was A. Raza. Not Ahmed Raza. Ayan Raza. A name Meher had never heard before. But it was signed as your brother. Her mother's brother. Mr. Raza's younger brother. And just like that, Meher's world shifted. Could it be? Was the man who tested her the one who changed her life also? Family? Sometimes, life brings people into your world not by blood, but by truth. A millionaire who trusted no one. A maid who had nothing but her values. And a moment, a test that changed both their lives forever. He opened a safe, expecting betrayal. She closed it, offering dignity. And from that single act, grew a legacy that taught thousands to dream, to learn, and to rise. They began as strangers from two different worlds. But through honesty, struggle, and compassion, they rewrote each other's destinies. And in the end, they discovered they were never strangers at all. Just lost pieces of the same story, finally coming home. Because real wealth isn't what you keep in a safe. It's what you give to the world when no one is watching.